We now take you to the radio ministry of the Church of Light.
There you go. That's what I want.
We now take you to the broadcast of It's Time with Reverend Nathaniel W. Martin. Here's Reverend Martin.
Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. And let me say Hotep Abaragani for my Africana Studies people. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, but certainly never good night and never ever goodbye, because I find goodbyes can be traumatizing. My name is the Reverend Nathaniel Wayne Martin. I'm the pastor of the New Life Institutional Baptist Church here in the city of Los Angeles. And we're located at 8916 South Main Street. And I say that for a second time, 8916 South Main Street here in the city of Los Angeles. And we are being hosted by our sister church, the Shiloh Missionary Christian Church, under the leadership of my good friend, the Reverend Dr. Della F. Hollinas. And you know they say when the Baptists and the Charismatics get together, there's always going to be a shouting in the camp. So we invite you to worship with us, 8916 South Main Street. That's New Life Institutional Baptist Church and the Shiloh Missionary Christian Church. Two churches, one building, one Lord, one faith, one baptism. We all in there worshiping the Lord together. And we ask your prayers, because sometimes the devil will try to raise up, but we pressing on. And God has been good, and we just trust going forward that, like Jesus, knowing that Judas was in the crowd, he will continue to deliver us. Hallelujah. And so we welcome you to worship with us at any and all of our services. We have services tonight, Friday night, beginning at 7 p.m. It's evangelistic night, and you may exercise your charismata, Christian gifts, within reason. And you always have to say within reason, because some people will just, take it too far. And then, of course, on Sundays we have our Sunday school beginning at 10 a.m. and that is followed at around about 11:15 for our morning worship. And we are back in full service, full swing. And so we're having evening services again as well. And so come on by and worship with us, won't you? All right. With that out of the way, the offering that you are viewing or listening to, the presentation, is entitled It's Time. And when the question or statement or declaration is made that it's time, someone should always ask, what is it time for? And for us, it is always time for social justice, racial justice, economic justice, environmental justice. And since social justice is such a broad and wide term, we usually just narrow it down to the environmental justice, which would allow us to look at the injustices that have been visited upon the poor. And most black people in this country have always been poor, the majority of them, in fact. And so that poverty has, coupled with the bigotry, has always played a part in where we were allowed to live, or where we were allowed to reside or get a habitat. And so when you are restricted by restrictive covenants into the worst environments across the nation, then of course that hampers your growth, because where you live determines where you shop, determines where you go to school, determines where you go for your health care and all of your services, but your accompanying services. And that is where you get community from. So if you are pinned in, hemmed in and in the ghetto, as it were, the slums, or the worst blighted areas, as the real estate people and who administered the segregation and resegregation of America have been able to make money, make millions, billions, trillions of dollars. Because let's face it, racism pays. It wouldn't be racism if it didn't pay. And so that has always been a handicap and a stumbling block in the aspirations and the growth potential of any group, especially black people, people who are designated as black here in America, knowing, of course, that race and racism are political and social constructs, that there is no, race does not occur in nature, but it did occur in the mind of the bigots who championed the scientific world for so long. Dr. Linnaeus and all of that crowd of pseudo-scientists that gave us the bell curve, and Dr. Shockley and all of those bigots that buttress the white supremacist teachings of the radical politicians that made their way to the ruling bodies, governing houses that make the laws that govern the country. And so we are still dealing with that legacy environmentally. The pollution in the air and the pollution in the ground, of course, where they allowed us to build our houses of worship or apartment buildings, and even our churches. We're always in, a lot of times, in environments that were polluted, and therefore, whether it was the black lung or the prevalence of cancer, which is still killing so many thousands, hundreds of people, thousands of people every year, right here in America. The nation as a whole has a great debt to pay for the generations of people that were forced by the restrictive covenants, which surprisingly enough started back east, but then spread all over the country. Those restrictive covenants precluded and excluded a lot of us from being able to purchase where we could buy. We had to buy where we could because they wouldn't let us buy where we wanted. And that legacy is still being with us, because unfortunately the same real estate companies and real estate financing offices and insurance offices, companies that underwrote the Federal Housing Administration, that bent over backwards to give a loan to the non-blacks, but did everything they could to prevent the non-whites from getting a loan, then that is still, its effects and its consequences are still with us right now. In spite of the fact that the highway construction people did their best to put their highways, their main thoroughfares, right through the heart of black town, black community, deliberately and intentionally, more than deliberately, because deliberately means we was so slow, but it was with celerity and intentionality that the highways that cross the nation now many of them were put through our communities. And the freeways, the highways, the railroads, some even hospitals took valuable land that black people were able to had been settled on, and expanded a park or a hospital. And so the litany of the effects, consciously and unconsciously, of racism, white racism, I might add, in this country continues. All right, that being spoken, we started last week to look at the fact that Christianity itself is a white man's religion. Thank God Jesus was not a Christian, and neither were the disciples Christian. The disciples were first called Christians in Antioch, not because Jesus called them Christian, but because the people called them Christian. And I say that because it gives you some cover when you want to kind of distance yourself from the machination of your white brothers and sisters, don't leave the sisters out, your white brothers and sisters. We spoke last week about the fact that Donald Trump just corralled the majority of the white evangelicals, and the white evangelicalism supported Trumpism, MAGA, wholeheartedly. And that led us into a study and a research on the impact of, excuse me, of white Christian supremacy, white Christian nationalism, or white Christian supremacy, because the two are almost one and the same. And the old black people used to have a hymn, spiritual, called "Everybody Talking About Heaven Ain't Going There," because certainly those who followed the liberation theology, and I'm one of those, worship and manifested a different side of the Bible from those who were of the dominionists, which means take charge and subdue and the like declension. And so those who are of the dominionist theology taught that anybody who was not a Christian, that you could take their lands and enslave them. And for hundreds of years, the church laid the foundation for the theft of the Americas, the enslavement of Africans and Native Americans, and centuries of brutal colonization worldwide, with the doctrine that it was okay to take land from people who were not Christian. And I wonder, I don't know how many of you saw the movie Amistad, but in the opening scenes you have the Spanish or European conquistadors coming on to the shores of Africa and reading an edict in Latin that nobody in Africa understood. And the edict said that this was by order of the church at Rome, and if you did not succumb, then they would do all the evil that they could against you. Of course, they amended that word evil in later editions of that same Intica Terra, as it was called at that time, a papal bull. And its impact was to allow the Spanish and the Portuguese to enslave people whose lands that they sought in the name of the church, which means that they had the backing of the Pope, they had the backing of the church, and they had the backing of God to go and enslave other people who were not Christians, who did not know them. And so that has been the one of the untalked about histories, tacit histories of the church, that the church was the great impetus and the catalyst for the discovery, as it were, put that in quotes. Explorers went out to discover, and everything they discovered they called their own, and they claimed it in the name of the church. And so that tradition is still with us to today. And here in America, you know, we had the civil rights struggles that go back into the antiquity, because way back in slavery they were having slave uprisings and rebellions. They called it servile insurrection, they being the white slave owning class. When the slaves rose up, they called that servile insurrection. And they put it down viciously. These were the same people, mind you, who said, "Give me liberty or give me death," and in their fight against the King of England to, in order for the 13 colonies to become free and equal and assume among the powers of the earth the status of a nationhood and no longer a colony of the crown. All right. So this white nationalism, which I am discussing today, is deeply rooted. Remember that conquered peoples up until 1800, the conquerors did not share Christ with them, because why? I got you as a slave. I'm taking your land. I don't want to make you a Christian, because now I may have to give your land back to you, or I may have to return you to your country of origin if I'm going to adhere to Christian values. And so consequently, Christian value were never adhered to by this nation. All protest of this being a godly, a Christian nation to the contraire, because the ways and actions belie this testimony of that this is a Christian nation. This has never been a Christian nation. It has been always a slave oppressive nation. It has stolen the land from the original owners, original peoples, and forced those peoples on a trail of tears, even under Andrew Jackson. I was listening to that song from Oklahoma. It says, "Oh, I'm just an Okie from Muskogee." But remember, Oklahoma territory was originally set up for the tribe, the Indian tribe, the defeated Indian tribes that had to march that Trail of Tears, and they were deposited there in Oklahoma, in what became Oklahoma territory. That's the history of Oklahoma. That's what it was meant to be. But then they discovered oil, and so now the place that they had said, told the Indians, you get over here, we won't kill you. Then when they began to discover oil on the Oklahoma territory, then of course what? They want to come back. Now we want to drive you somewhere else and get you in another spot. And just like they did to the Americans after slavery, that's what they did to the Indians during slavery and thereafterward. And they had the slogan, "The only good Indian is a dead Indian." What I was saying about that Okie song, I'm just an Okie from Muskogee. We still wave Old Glory down at the courthouse. Yeah, but they also scalped Indians. They also had African Americans in slavery, enslaved, in bondage. And lest we forget, just because we're listening to that song, you got to look behind the words of a song and look at the history of the territory or the state or the county or the city or the nation of the people who are there, while the people who are there are not supposed to be there. That land was supposed to be the home of the Indians. And then when the speculators discovered oil, they began to drive the Indians out of the places where they had told them. And while there's still a lot of Indians in Oklahoma, a lot of them had to be relocated to other places because they were in the way of people who wanted to drill for oil. And remember, Oklahoma was set up back in the 1800s. And the subsequent history of that state of Oklahoma, I would remind you, is a very dark history. But remember, that was the place where they had Black Wall Street back in 1921, 1923, because the people who were politically not denominated as white did not want to be seen socializing with the people who were politically denominated as black. And consequently, well, we weren't black, we were Negro colored at that time. The Negroes had to find some place out from the white folks where they could start a community, start their town. And it's a very interesting history of Tulsa and Black Wall Street, and it was the Greenwood district, and how it became so successful, and so many colored people were millionaires and well-to-do business people. They had their own doctors, they had their own dentists, they had their own lawyers, they had their own banks, they had their own theaters, they had their own schools, they had their own hospitals, all of that. And markets and supermarkets and all of that, because they were coming up out of a time just before the horseless carriage. So you had the blacksmith shop, was doing a good business. The tanner, where you got your saddles and your leather goods, were doing a grand theft business, serving the needs of their own community. And so that money was not going to the uptown folks who said, we don't want the black people around us. We want y'all to step off the sidewalk when we're around. So all of that I remind you of because of the cognitive dissonance, well, we call it hypocrisy, that exists between America's stated aim, or its aspirational aim, because we've never been the United States of America. We've always been just what we are, a hodgepodge of states, and the main thing that has overwhelmingly kept them together is that white supremacy, that white Christian nationalism, that white supremacy. And so that legacy, or that ideology, or philosophy, or theology, because it's in our churches, has played the major role in all of the conflicts in this nation that have been the underlying ulterior motive has always been the domination of white supremacy. And the liberation theologists, Christians, have always struggled to find themselves a place to stand and to succeed in spite of all of the opposition. And remember, when a man is opposed to your very existence, like I said, they came and burned Black Wall Street down. They started riots. 5 minutes. They started riots. They get on us about 1965. Well, we didn't riot in 1965. Now, what they did in 1923, when white folks rioted, they killed a whole bunch of black folks and took their towns and took their goods and took their merchandise and destroyed their city. And in spite of the fact that the African Americans came back and determinedly to rebuild their homes and their cities and their towns, it was never left to flourish after that. And what I mean by that was, I told you about that great highway project and how that highway project went straight through the heart of the rebuilt Greenwood section of Tulsa, Oklahoma. So it never stops. I'm saying is white supremacy never stops. They've always plotting how they can take back whatever foot or inches you have glacially, slowly been able to progress to. When the backlash comes, they want to push you back a mile, and you only had an inch or a foot. And so that is what we are still struggling with, even in our black churches, is the influence of the white church and that white Christianity and its ability to pull us along in spite of our seemingly otherworldliness. Because they say, well, we all worship the same God. Well, I don't know about all of that worshiping the same God. Because like I said, I grew up in this nation. And before I close, let me also say that I said last week that I didn't know anything about white Christian nationalism as a child. But once I got on reflection, I do remember that by the time I was able to listen to the radio and understand what they were saying, I could hear the radio announcer for Billy Graham saying, and God bless the good white Christian nation. And that was a broadcast that came out of Del Rio, Texas at that time. So they always have had that white nationalism, the good white Christian nation. They always have pushed that, even when they began to push and promote Billy Graham, who became one of the greatest evangelists for the United States in our history. He always called thousands to Christ and everything, but he wasn't all that we thought he was. All right, we always must continue to strive to do better, and we must never give up the fight. We must never get weary of the conflict. Remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Therefore, as I close, my brothers and my sisters, if you're working on a job and they don't want to pay you, please take my advice. Don't work for them. Thank you, Doc. We out of here.
I just say thank you, Lord.